Welcome to the Nightcrawler podcast. Today, we are talking about the best reboots. We're going to talk about the best remakes and reboots on this one. Wow, I'm eloquent. That was good. Kraig, what makes a good remake or reboot? What do you look for in a remake or a reboot?
Me personally, I'm a little weird about reboots. Reboots obviously are very popular right now. Everyone wants to kind of cash in on nostalgia or just the fantasy of, like, even if you haven't seen an old movie but you hear it's being remade, it's almost more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like, people are really buying into the idea of reboots and remakes. So me personally, like, if a movie was bad but you knew it had something there, I completely look forward to those movies being remade. Or if a movie was made and it was just not funded well,
right?
Like the actors were subpar, but the story was there, or maybe the effects weren't there to kind of put it all together. The scenery, like I've seen there's probably a handful of good movies out there that are just like they didn't have the money to travel, so they couldn't get the exact settings that they wanted, stuff like that. So those are the kind of movies I look forward to being remade, is when they're just trying to take what was already working and do it just better.
Right. I guess I look for somewhat of the same things. Like, I guess I kind of agree with you. Do a remake. Of course, if you want to deconstruct what you did, that's always interesting. There's always got to be, like you said, an additional concept to mine out of the original idea. So, or that original idea has to be prevalent again, or even more prevalent now, even more necessary to express now, like that kind of thing. Let's just hop into. I do disagree about, like, effects not being there, stuff like that. I don't really think that matters. It's more about just concepts. But let's just jump into the best. Do you have any, off the top of your head, like a remake that you saw or a reboot that was like, this is better than the original? Or at least on par with it in some sort of, like, equally powerful way?
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head.
That's cool. I got a list here. So we're going to go down them. Number one being, if you listen to this podcast at all, you'll know I'm a huge, Miami Vice fan, so I won't go into it here. But the 2006 Michael Mann, I guess, reboot or remake, film version of the television show, and is an amazing deconstruction of 80s iconography. It's an amazing philosophical statement about crime and about, it's like a neon Socrates kind of thing. I love it to death. So Miami Vice is obviously my favorite reboot or remake. Did you watch The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum?
No, but I've heard really good things about it.
It's a great remake.
Love Jeff Goldblum, so.
Well, a lot of people should love Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum's a really cool dude. But that's a good reboot or remake. Totally turns all the concepts on its head. And like I said, if a concept becomes even more, like, important or urgent now, like that kind of bleeds into it, because Cronenberg almost he made it in the 80s, and you almost get an undercurrent or subtext of the AIDS scare or sexually transmitted diseases. You get like an undercurrent of that inside of The Fly. So he kind of made it even more perfect for the times. And then you got Scarface, the Al Pacino movie, which was a remake of course, the Howard Hawks, Howard Hughes produced movie starring Paul Muni and George Raft. They remade it. Brian De Palma remade it with Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer, and I thought it did very good. I'm a Brian De Palma fan, so I kind of like his general sleaziness behind the camera. Did you like Scarface?
I've not seen it.
You gotta see that one at least.
There's a giant list of why haven't you seen these movies that I been meaning to check off.
A lot of people have problems with Scarface, but I don't. I think those people are just trying to be edgy by not liking like the most popular thing in the world, I guess. There's really no reason not to like the movie Scarface. They're just trying to be contrarian, so far as I'm concerned. And then we get The Departed. Scorsese remade Infernal Affairs. Of course, I think he made that's at least unequivocally better than the original. Scorsese outdid himself there. Then we get Mildred Pierce, which I just wanted to include. The HBO miniseries starring Kate Winslet, Evan Rachel Wood, and Guy Pearce is at least on par with the Michael Curtiz Joan Crawford film, with the best Zachary Scott performance I've ever seen. It's at least on par with it. It goes for additional concepts in there. Then I'm just going to run through a couple of these. Like A Fistful of Dollars, I actually think is better than Yojimbo, which is the movie it completely rips off. I think Sergio Leone did it much better than Akira Kurosawa. And then you get the True Grit remake by the Coen brothers, and I think everyone agrees that that movie is stronger than the original. The original is very good still a very good movie, but the remake is something incredible there. And then we get into the Christopher Nolan Batman reboot. And I also wanted to include the Tim Burton films as well, because technically those were rebooting what we were most familiar with Batman with at the time, which was the 60s television show and Adam West. And he had quite a task ahead of him, kind of reinventing The Dark Knight. And then Christopher Nolan kind of had the same daunting task with making us forget about the Joel Schumacher films and creating the most realistic superhero world that I've ever seen. It's basically a Michael Mann ripoff universe, but still, I quite like it. Do you have any idea? I just named a bunch of movies there. Do you have any input on those?
No, I'm starting to think we watch completely different movies, to be honest.
Well, then what remakes or reboots, man, are you thinking of, dude?
I don't know. I don't have a list.
Well, I also got Casino Royale here, the beginning of the Daniel Craig James Bond series.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really good movie, but reboot. Is it a direct reboot, or are you just saying like it's a reintroduction of James Bond?
Well, it's not a reintroduction. It's not an introduction of a new James Bond as opposed to like when we got Pierce Brosnan or Timothy Dalton. The first time you see 007 in Casino Royale, he's becoming a 00. And we also meet like the male M, we meet Q, we meet Moneypenny all for the first time in the criminal organization known as Spectre. These were all long-standing staples of the series before this, and if we're meeting them for the first time, therefore they're rebooting them. It's not really reintroducing, it's a complete reboot, because these things weren't known before these new movies. So it is technically a reboot. And it was billed as partly as a reboot, or at least a prequel, when Casino Royale first came out. It wasn't just, check out this new James Bond, like it has been with all the other ones. It was, he's younger, he's making more mistakes, and he's a bit more aggressive and more raw. Like, you can tell he's learning. He's learning things. So Casino Royale is definitely a reboot. I think people forget that it was kind of sold to us as a reboot of the franchise. But every subsequent component of the James Bond Daniel Craig series has reintroduced or rebooted long-standing characters.
No, I haven't gone back and watched any of the old James Bond movies recently, but I've obviously seen a couple of them growing up. And I want to say that Daniel Craig's version of James Bond seems more real. I don't know. It seems more like a well fleshed out character. The other characters seem more like this is 007 as opposed to this is James Bond.
No, I totally agree with that as well. They made him more complicated. Thought it was even slightly courageous in Skyfall when, like, kind of homoerotic moments between Silva and Bond of, like, what makes you think this is my first time, like stuff like that. And it is pretty sexually ambiguous, so they went complicated with sexual energy. And also, I think it was the sign of the times with making Bond a bit more bit more realistic, a bit more emotionally or physically substantial. Because I mean, at Casino Royale time, I'm sure that was like the age of Batman Begins, and like that we were just talking about, which is kind of rebooting a franchise or like reintroducing a franchise, but with more human elements attached to these kind of mythical characters. So that's like a sign of the times thing, and it's interesting to see that kind of wean off now. I think that's kind of weaning off because DC movies have tried to mine that for all it's worth and have come up with like nothing because they're so talentless at doing that exact concept. And I think Daniel Craig's actually the best Bond, and a large part of that is owed to what you were just saying about him being more of a character than an archetype or than just a popular screen figure. You know, like you certainly don't watch a Roger Moore James Bond movie for the pathos, but you could put on Casino Royale or Spectre for the pathos.
Yeah, it's almost as if you took a superhero movie and if you watched a superhero movie and the superhero never took off their mask, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting.
Yeah. Now it wouldn't be nearly as interesting.
But yeah, because it's probably due to the fact that we've had so much fantasy thrown at us over and over and over again that we're wanting a step back. Like maybe we just enjoy seeing the realistic side of fantasy.
Would you call Casino Royale? I always call aspects of Skyfall a deconstruction, but would you call the Daniel Craig films kind of like a deconstruction of Bond in a way? I mean, not a super crazy one, not like a super in-depth one, but like it keeps it within range to use like the deconstructive elements.
I mean, there's probably an argument to be there, but I wouldn't say that they actively.
Yeah, not actively, but like I said, like almost within. Like if you wanted to go into it and watch, particularly like Skyfall, probably with like a philosophical bent, lean, or bias of like, I don't think that you'd be grabbing onto things that aren't actually there. I think those things are there. You just have to give it a lot more effort than the. I do think that there are deconstructionist elements involved in the films, like you said, not actively, but they're there. Like you can take the fruit off the tree there. They did establish several elements that you can sink your teeth into and really think about. But I think that Sam Mendes and the makers of the movies were mature and refined enough to not spotlight that kind of deconstructionist cinema, which is interesting. I think those movies are pretty good, pretty interesting, and you can either take them at face value or you can dig deep into them, and I don't think you'd be digging without any evidence or to no avail. I think that there is a deeper texture to the franchise.
Yeah, I don't think it would go all too far, but I do agree. It's actually making me want to rewatch the movie because now I think of the scene where they completely destroy his car. And I don't know why, but when we're talking about deconstructing Bond as a character, like all I can picture is his iconic car being completely destroyed.
And it's like almost has a castrating effect. Yeah, that's awesome. And Silva himself, I think Javier Bardem's villain in Skyfall, is a complete deconstruction of the Bond villain aesthetic. I mean, he captures all the staples, but he kind of vomits them back at you,
and like you were saying, the eroticism that he brings is almost like a heavy-handed version of what you would get from other villains.
Exactly.
Like he's just telling you as opposed to it just being in the
That's brilliant.
background.
That's one of the best villains I've seen in movies in the last 20 years. I know I've seen so many, and I agree. I fully agree. You can see where they're coming from. With if you didn't have Heath Ledger's Joker, you most likely wouldn't have Silva or the Skyfall movie. For some reason, that did come out at a time where like every villain wanted to get arrested and captured on purpose so that they could go through with their ridiculous like 12-point plan where like chance and coincidence plays into it. You know, like it is very much like that. But whereas The Dark Knight is it's a good movie, but it's a Heat ripoff. Skyfall is a movie that was directly inspired by The Dark Knight. I think does everything better than The Dark Knight did. Skyfall is an amazing movie. We got a little. No, we didn't really get off track here. What else? I'm going to go with something else that you probably hadn't seen.
All right.
But anyways, next you have seen. We actually have talked about how much we both like the Sherlock television show, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman, and Andrew Scott. Amazing television show, an amazing. You see, do we have different definitions of what reboot means? Like, would you consider that a reboot, or at least a modernization?
Well, yeah, but Sherlock Holmes has been rebooted so many times that it's almost like we don't even think about it when they do it. Like if they were to make another Sherlock Holmes movie right now, nobody would care.
No, does anybody know?
It would just happen.
Yeah, we had two concurrent Sherlocks going on at the same time. We had Downey Jr.'s and Benedict's, and no one really noticed there were two.
Yeah, and then we had the American TV show, which was, in my opinion, complete garbage.
Johnny Lee Miller's show. Holy shit. Lucy Liu. Oh my god, I forgot that show existed.
Yeah, I mean, good for you.
It was better days when I forgot it existed. But the British television show, I don't know what makes it work so perfectly other than, like, Benedict Cumberbatch's, like, natural, I don't know, presence or charisma, and Andrea Scott's complete understanding of the Moriarty role. It has to probably do with structure as well, because you get 3 episodes per season, 90 minutes long. A lot of people say it's overwritten, but I just think that they're misplacing that's a misplaced criticism, because the show itself expresses the characteristics of its subject, and its subject is an overwrought and hyperactive individual. Therefore, the show should also be that way. So I just don't think that criticism holds any water. I'm trying to figure out why it's such a good reboot, because some of the ways they bring them into modern times or modernity is a bit nauseating, but it all works. It all works perfectly. I'm trying to think of why it's a good reboot. Trying to put my finger on it, other than amazing performances. Probably just the reimagination of Moriarty and Sherlock is what does it for me.
I don't know, like, one thing that I love, and it seems like something you would think would get old pretty fast, but every time they do it, it's just fantastic. When they show Sherlock's thought process.
Oh yeah.
When it's got like the random
where
it's just flying around and like numbers calculated and stuff like that.
Yeah, close like, up on like a hair.
I feel like I would call that corny any other time, but it works so well. And just I don't know, like they really throw you into Sherlock's world, and that's why I think it works so well. It's because
they really do.
It's not like you're just watching Sherlock. You're experiencing Sherlock.
Oh, yes, exactly. But you are experiencing it by proxy through Watson. So even then, it's a nice filtered view, even most of the time.
Yeah,
very good.
Because sometimes you go directly into Sherlock's head, which.
And a lot of people had problems with this most current 4th season that involved his sister. I loved it. I thought it was great. Of course, I love the Moriarty fan service of him singing "I wanna be free" or "Break Free" by Queen. No, it's just a very good show. Very good show. So move on to Cruel Intentions. Did you ever see Cruel Intentions? It's a modernization or a reboot of Dangerous Liaisons. Either a classic work, or you can view it as the John Malkovich and Michelle Pfeiffer, Uma Thurman, Keanu Reeves movie. Cruel Intentions was Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Philippe, Selma Blair, gorgeous Selma Blair, and Reese Witherspoon, kind of acting like, I don't know, if you've never seen it, you might not like it now if you watched it, but like I grew up with it. It was in the era of like, probably it's just a bad teen movie, but I have nostalgia for it. Maybe it's misplaced nostalgia, but I still put it here. Did you see The Thing? John Carpenter's The Thing with Kurt Russell?
Oh, John Carpenter's? Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's a reboot. That's a remake of The Thing from outer space.
Really?
Yes. And it's excellent.
Because I know that there was a reboot of that movie.
Yeah, there was a reboot of the
and
reboot.
I haven't seen it, but I was told it was completely horrible.
No, it's not good at all. It's not good at all. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay.
The John Carpenter movie itself was actually a reboot of the very old.
I've actually watched that. I guess it wasn't all that recent. It feels like it was fairly recent. It was maybe like 2 years, a year and a half ago.
I love Kurt Russell. I think that John Carpenter and Kurt Russell have partnered up to make like the coolest fucking movies ever. Of course, I'm thinking immediately of Escape from New York, one of my favorite action movies, Big Trouble in Little China, one of my favorite childhood memories, and The Thing, which has some of my favorite effects I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah, really good practical effects. That's
amazing practical effects, and it's probably my favorite Keith David role as well. It's really good. It's really good.
Just the opening scene of that movie caught me right off the bat because it's my friend's favorite movie. He's a huge horror film fanatic, and he'll watch every horror film beginning to end, even if he hates it before he watches it. Like, he can read a synopsis, say this movie's probably going to suck, and then watch it all the way through just because.
Yeah, I can't even do that with action. I have my limits.
It's just because he's watched so much that at this point he's just searching for the next great thing. But overall films, he says that the Thing is the best, hands down.
The best at effects?
The best as far as
or as films go?
Overall horror goes.
I think your friend's wrong.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You think there's better horror films?
Than The Thing? Yeah. Suspiria would immediately go on there. Dario Argento's beautiful, beautiful movie. Alien is better than The Thing. I mean, if you just want to go to the science fiction route, Alien's a lot better than The Thing.
I guess he's got his reasons. I don't know.
He's got to have his reasons. I don't think it's a wrong idea. I'm not saying it shouldn't be on a top 10 somewhere. Opinion. I don't think it shouldn't be on a top 10. Well, that's my personal opinion as well. I think Halloween is better than The Thing, even if you just want to go with Carpenter. I would have to hear justification for that. It wouldn't shock me to see it on a top 10 somewhere. But no, I can't get down with it being the best horror movie. Yeah, Suspiria, Alien, and Halloween that I just named immediately come to mind as being superior to it on basically every level. Kurt Russell's fucking awesome. I'm not gonna say anything about that man. That man's my dad. We got The Untouchables, which was Brian De Palma made the movie in the 80s. It's kind of a reboot, a remake of the popular television show about Elliot Ness and his cadre that took down Al Capone. I love the movie The Untouchables. People like to rag on it because Elliot Ness is always 2 steps ahead of everybody else, like a staple good guy. That's why that's it. That's the show. That's why we're watching it. A lot of great De Palma motifs involved in it. Ennio Morricone scored to die for. And De Niro fucking kicking ass as Al Capone, man. Really good. Kevin Costner was even really good in that movie. That movie is really good. It should be reappraised and revalued as being a very good movie. And then I don't know where else I could put this. Dracula in 31 when Todd Browning was making the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. At the same time, concurrently and independently, to that version being made, there was a Spanish version being made that had far more in common with F.W. Murnau's sensibilities than Browning's, which is kind of conventionally boring or artistically bland. You also had the Spanish version at the same time, which is a far more fascinating, sophisticated movie to watch from a technical viewpoint or vantage point. It's not a reboot. It was made at the same exact time. It's just a different version. If I don't bring it up here, I won't ever bring it up. And I did include Tron Legacy on here. What are your thoughts on Tron?
I don't want to say that I haven't seen the first one, because I know I've seen the first one when I was a kid, but I haven't seen the first one recent enough to really compare them. But as a standalone movie, I mean, I have no reason to dislike it outright. I thought it was really fun. Like it was visually appealing, I suppose. Like
Definitely
I
visually
really
appealing.
love the aesthetic.
I watched it in theaters. I never watched it again, but I really dug the aesthetic of the reboot, and I thought they did a good job. A lot of great like bits of fan service, and basically, I couldn't think of a better. See, it operates as a sequel so well too. So I don't even know if this really qualifies, but I couldn't think of a better way to continue or reboot the Tron story than what they did there. Next, we're gonna get on like what most people probably think is the best reboot in history, and that's probably Star Trek: The Next Generation, going from Captain Kirk to Jean-Luc Picard. Um, Gotta say, it's a super inspired, really well done reboot that has more than legs. It has like 4 feature films and 9 seasons. It outlasted the original series in every way. I'm an original series fan. That's what I like the best. I don't. I like TNG, but not crazy for it, not bonkers for it. Whereas I can really get into some original series material. But I understand the Next Generation and what people latched onto it.
Now that is probably one thing that my dad actually does nerd out on is Star Trek. He's a huge Star Trek fan. Probably more so Star Trek than Star Wars.
Mm.
Probably just because of the fact that unless you get into books, there's just more to take in with Star Trek than there is Star Wars. So yeah, I definitely grew up watching the Star Trek movies. I remember the one where they like saved what was it, a whale or something?
Yeah, that was the voyage home. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I've seen the one with like the Borg.
First Contact. The best one's The Wrath of Khan, in my opinion. And most people's probably. It's not like a controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, it's probably the most referenced thing as far as Star Trek goes too is the iconic scene where he's yelling Khan.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of the show here and there. Probably more episodes than I would probably believe myself if I knew how many episodes I've seen, I probably wouldn't believe it. Just because,
right.
Coming in the living room, my dad already watching it. I just sit down and watch it as well. I've never sat down and watched them like back to back, but yeah, I've taken on a lot of Star Trek. So,
and I can definitely see why it's such a good or such a beloved. I don't know. Gene Roddenberry could just put in the best cast of characters, ones that like represent everyone you know, and you can see yourself in them. It's really interesting.